Hi, I'm Susmita Veganosaurus from the Feel Good Factor podcast. I recently completed Adam's course, Limited Series Podcast Funnel Blueprint. And oh my god, I have to tell you, this was a wonderful project to work on. He made everything so simple, so easy, so doable. I can't even imagine how lost I would have been if I tried to do this on my own. So, today I've launched my brand new limited series podcast, Vegan Business and Marketing Tips, and I'm so excited. I've already started all the work on the launch week, and I cannot thank Adam enough for all his help and his generous sharing of knowledge on the course. So, grab this course if you want to start a podcast too. Limited series podcast funnel blueprint.
What's up, pod pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are listening to Podcasting Business School. It's a show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. If you are a coach, consultant, or service provider, and you are looking to learn how to build your brand, grow your podcast, and get more clients from your podcast, you are in the exact right spot. Welcome to all of our new listeners. A lot of new people listening to the show right now. Very excited to welcome you to the ecosystem of Podcasting Business School. A lot of people coming over for my threads. I'm chatting on threads all day, almost every day. I take the weekends off. You know how I roll. But I'm loving that Threads app, y'all. So if you found me on Threads, make sure that we're chatting back and forth on the Threads app. But I appreciate you bouncing over here into the podcast, and I will look to over deliver in this space. So this is episode 519. And today we're talking about the strategy that I like better than a quote unquote secret podcast, AKA a private podcast. So this one, I think this is going to hit home for a lot of you. I'm seeing confusion around this space. And really the motivating thing that really got me fired up about this episode was I feel like there's potential for podcasters, especially newer podcasters, and especially newer podcasters with a very limited marketing budget. There's potential for that group of people to be taken advantage of by these terms. All right, so let me explain. So every time I go on Facebook and Instagram for the past month, all I see are ads about secret podcast. And there's this lady on there. I don't even know her name. I haven't clicked on it or anything, but it's like it's following me wherever I go. Secret podcast. It's the thing. I made millions of dollars with my secret podcast. It does all the selling for you. The secret podcast. And I'm sure this woman is awesome. I'm sure she has an awesome company. I'm sure the product is awesome. And I know what she's doing with a secret podcast, or otherwise known as a private podcast. And I feel like the roots of that concept are valid and good. And there's some good applications to it. But I feel like there's a critical error where people can be sold into this and they realize that this method isn't for them. And I've got something that's going to be more effective, especially if you are a podcaster with a limited budget for Facebook and Instagram ads, and especially if you don't have a lot of Facebook and Instagram ad skills. There's a better option. All right. So everywhere I go on Facebook and Instagram, this woman follows me with their secret podcast ads. Now, I'm also seeing a lot of chatter, on Threads, on Instagram, a lot on Threads. Like I said, I'm on Threads a lot, and I hear people talking about, should I start a private podcast? And these are people that haven't even launched their first regular podcast yet, and they're thinking about starting with a private podcast. So I see a lot of confusion around this concept. So with this secret podcast thing, with this private podcast thing, a general goal seems to be to get people on your email list and then into a sales funnel. So you have a secret podcast or a private podcast, and it's like, hey, you can have access to this if you give me your email address, and now you're in my email funnel and I'm going to sell to you, which, like I said, that's a valid formula. Like I'm not hating on that at all. And I think there are some good uses of a private podcast. And so that's how I would define a private podcast. Like you can't find a private podcast by searching organically on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else. You can't find it. you have to get it's behind an email wall or potentially a paywall. So I'll quit using the term secret podcast and just call this whole thing private podcast. That'll make it simpler. So you cannot access a private podcast without giving up your email and or paying something. Now let's talk about real quick a couple of good uses of a private podcast. I think it's a great idea as an add-on for a membership or group coaching offer. In fact, if you join my Download Growth Club, I have a Download Growth Club private podcast with over 60, I think we're at 61 episodes now that none of you have ever heard unless you're in that membership community. So 61 episodes that have never been aired anywhere else but that private podcast feed. That's an add-on for the Download Growth Club membership. If you guys want to do a 14-day trial, shameless plug, downloadgrowthclub.com, go check it out. But that's a great add-on. My members love that. Like that's something that they only get. And it's one of the selling points. You get a private podcast just for you. So I think that's a good use of a private podcast as an add-on to an offer. Now, I also think for those of you that have interview only based shows, I know there's not a whole lot of you that listen to this show, but you do exist out there in my audience. So if you have an interview only based show, I think this is a private podcast is a good low ticket monetization strategy for you. So you'll see like Dr. Peter Attia, he's got the Drive podcast and he's a health expert and he does pretty much only interviews. And he'll say, hey, if you want the full episode or the bonus content, you have to pay to be in our inner circle or whatever it's called. And you had to pay, usually it's less than $20 or something like that, or $5 a month or whatever. There'll be some low ticket price point where you gain access to a private podcast feed or additional content or the whole episode or the episode without audio or without commercials, I should say. And that's kind of a similar concept. But a lot of people will be like, okay, maybe you've got an interview only based show. And then you're like, we do solo episodes where we unpack the interview, but that's only available in our $5 per month Inner Circle Club, VIP podcast listener club, whatever. And that's a private podcast feed that they have to pay to gain access to. So I think those are two good uses or optimal uses of a private podcast. All right. And again, I'm not hating on the secret podcast, private podcast thing in general, but I think that people are getting confused about the best ways to use this. And I think those two things that I just described, those are the best ways to use a private podcast for sure. Add on to like a membership group coaching, or if you're interview only and you have bonus content and you want to charge people a low ticket amount and monetize a little bit. Boom, great fit. Where this isn't really going to work well is if you're a service provider and you're trying to leverage your podcast to get clients and you don't have a big ads budget and you don't have experience, again, with running Facebook and Instagram ads. So this whole concept, like this secret podcast lady is spending major money. Like she is everywhere I go for weeks, if not months on social media. She is dropping major budget on these ads. All right. And they're good ads. I'm sure they convert. I'm sure they're converting. All right. And again, that's why I'm a lot of reason why I'm doing this episode is to just be like, okay, this is for you if, but this is probably not for you if. And that this is the part where I'm like, this is the other option that I would steer you towards, which is the option that I have done myself. And I call that a limited series podcast funnel. So ultimately, with the private podcast thing, like I said, their goal is to teach you how to have this feed. It's a lead magnet, and people give you their email list and they enter your sales funnel via because they want the private podcast. That's the thing that they want. My thought on this is create a limited series podcast funnel that is open and in the RSS feed. It's open to the public. It's searchable and discoverable by everyone. And I feel like the main difference with what I'm talking about, the limited series podcast funnel, is you don't put it behind an email wall. You don't put it behind a paywall. Instead, we're leveraging organic discoverability so that Apple and Spotify bring all our ideal listeners to the show for us. You guys hear me talk about organic discoverability all the time. I'll say it again. The name of your show will be the number one reason why your ideal listeners find you, or the number one reason why not. Most of the time it's why not. So with these private podcast promoter people, They don't understand this. They don't understand that Apple and Spotify could be doing all the work for us. And you can still have all the same principles of delivering solo episodes, expert positioning. The show acts kind of like a funnel. It's like an audio course. I've got a full breakdown of Is a Limited Series Podcast Funnel for you. It's in episode 405 of Podcasting Business School. I'm not going to do a thorough breakdown, but if this concept is like it's percolating in your brain piece a little bit, episode 405, I'll link it in the show notes. I've got a note here to make sure I put that in the show notes. I know sometimes I say that I'll link that in the show notes. We all say that as podcasters, then we forget sometimes. I am definitely one of those people. I apologize, but this one, I've got the note right in front of me. It's going in the show notes for sure. If not, call me out. Call me out on Threads. Like, you didn't put it in the show notes, you idiot. So episode 405, or just go to just hit the pause button, go to episode 405 right now, download it, and you'll be good to go. That's another option. So that's where I break down the whole limited series podcast funnel concept. And I have a limited series podcast that's called Podcast Monetization Tips for Online Coaches, Consultants, and Service Providers. I'll link that in the show notes as well. So that is my limited series podcast funnel. But again, I don't put it behind a paywall. I don't put it behind an email wall. And again, the private podcast, they want to put it behind an email wall to collect an email, get you into the funnel, and make sales and get clients. What I'm doing with this is I understand organic discoverability. I understand podcast searchability, keywords, SEO, whatever you want to call it. So I name it correctly. Again, look at the name of the show: Podcast Monetization Tips for Online Coaches, Consultants, and Service Providers. All right. So my naming formula, number one, I need to know exactly what it's about. Check. Number two, I need to know exactly who it's for. Check. And number three, I need at least 2 keywords. I've got like 5 keywords. This show I launched in August of 2023. And it has brought me business every week since August of 2023. And I have not put any new episodes out. I will not. It's 21 episodes, done, start to finish, from 1 to 21. That's it. And the thing is, all the private podcast people are like, but you got to get them on your email list. You got to get them on your funnel. You got to sell to them. Well, this show does that too. That's how it works. But instead of spending money on Facebook and Instagram ads, because I suck at that, and I just don't filter a lot of my business revenue towards ad spend. All right. I just choose to not do that. So instead, I leverage organic discoverability so the ideal listeners are finding me on Apple, finding me on Spotify, finding me on Overcast, finding me wherever you listen. The right people are finding that week after week. And here's the deal. And this is really the key strategy with this. I'm just going to give it to you. You have to create a downloadable tool that goes along with the limited series podcast. So we're still getting them on our email list. We're still getting them in our funnel, and we can still sell to them via email and on the show at the same time. So it still all works the same, except instead of me spending ad money, I've messed around with some Overcast FM ads and stuff like that. I haven't run any Facebook or Instagram ads to that show. I don't need to. That's kind of what the point I'm trying to prove here is that Apple and Spotify are bringing me the right people to listen. They go, oh, episode 1, Adam's talking about this companion workbook. I've got to get the workbook to do the homework assignment from each episode in the limited series podcast. So they download the workbook, and that enters them into an email funnel. One of my simple 10 email funnels. It's not a big deal. And that brings them down that client conversion pathway that I've talked about before and brings them towards becoming a client. All right. So the whole strategy, all the concepts are the same between a private podcast and a limited series podcast funnel. But instead of me spending money on Facebook and Instagram ads, Apple and Spotify do the work for free because I understand organic discoverability. And so they're still getting on my email list. I'm still getting them into a marketing funnel. And here's the trump card. Here's the thing that wins this argument. If I'm on a debate stage and I'm arguing with secret podcast, private podcast people, here's the key thing. I can still run ads to this show. So the marketing strategy that they are choosing to use, I can do the exact same thing with my limited series podcast funnel. I can still run an ad and send people to that show Now, they don't give up their email in the ad to get access to the show. But again, everybody is getting this workbook because it's like it's an assignment. I'm like, to optimize the experience. If you really want to learn how to get clients from your podcast, download the workbook. There's a homework assignment in there. It follows along with each episode. Each episode has an assignment. Do the homework, you'll get better results. And now, will everybody do that? No. But when we talk about building our list with high quality people that are action takers, that are ideal fit clients, that person that finds your show, they're searching podcast monetization, they find podcast monetization tips, they start binge listening, they download the workbook, they are on my email list. Like, this all makes sense, loving it. These are the people that buy without even talking to me. They just buy. Some people do a discovery call, and that's awesome too. But I've had more people just go through and listen to the show, get the workbook, and just buy stuff buy the offer that makes the most sense, that's presented in front of them from my marketing funnel. I've had more people do that with this offer and with this show than anything else that I do. So, but if I chose to, I could run Facebook and Instagram ads to this so that it still works the same. But I've just chosen not to because it works so well without it. All right. So that is my argument for using a limited series podcast funnel. Again, episode 405, I break down the ins and outs of exactly how I do that, key points for who should be doing this, how to make it all work for you. That is all there. All cards on the table. I do sell a course that breaks this whole thing down. It gives you my exact blueprint. In fact, it's called the Limit Series Podcast Funnel Blueprint. I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well, or you can go to podcastingbusiness.school/LSPF, Limited Series Podcast Funnel, LSPF. And look at me. I'm just on the ball today. I think it's because I switched up my coffee routine, and I'm feeling the cold brew coffee vibes right now. But not only will that link be in the show notes, I've also put together a special code where you can save $100 if you're like, I'm in, I want to do this, I want to learn from Adam. It's already a great price. But you can knock $100 off. Let's see, this episode goes live on the 15th of October. If you sign up, the discount code LSPF, limited series podcast funnel, LSPF, they'll save you $100 by the 20th. So you got 5 days to listen to episode 405. If you're like, hey, this is the thing that I want to try instead of a private podcast, then I want to learn how Adam does it exactly. And the cool thing about my online course, it doesn't come with coaching. That's how I'm able to price it so effectively. But you can ask a question underneath any of the course videos. It goes directly to my email inbox. I can respond directly, and it's just like you're getting one-on-one coaching. All right. So check that out. Save $100 by the 20th. You got 5 days to think about it. LSPF will save you $100. All right. That is all I've got for you with this episode. Hopefully, again, my goal was to eliminate some of the confusion. I'm just seeing a lot of confusion in the conversation. I see newer people being swayed in this direction, and I don't think it's the best fit with a private podcast. I think that, what I created with the Limited Series Podcast Funnel, it's a little bit of a better option for the majority of people. All right. And you make the choice. That's always up to you. All right, Pod Pals, I appreciate you. I'm very excited as we head kind of blast through the fourth quarter of the year here and keep building momentum. So I will send you all out into the world, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. I will see you on the next episode. If you need a little bit of help with your podcast launch, growth, or monetization strategy, head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and get signed up for a free podcast profit potential discovery call. During this free 20-minute discovery call session, I'm going to analyze your podcasting brand and tell you where I think you're missing on an opportunity for profits. Next, I'm going to tell you exactly what I suggest that you do as your next step. If I've got an offer that would help you accelerate the process, we can discuss working together as well. So head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and click on the Discovery Call button to schedule your free Podcast Profit Potential Discovery Call.